Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's LinkedIn Live. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I'm the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, the Blended Podcast, and the founder of the Blended Pledge. And I am so happy to be collaborating once again with the amazing team at CargoWise. Now, we've worked together for a number of years and have created so much great content together. So go and search their name over on letstalksupplychain.com after today's live to discover a lot more valuable discussions and resources. And so today we're talking about the future-proofing your supply chain operations and sharing brand new insights on leveraging technology to achieve lasting impact for your organization. Now, in today's rapidly evolving logistics landscape, digital transformation is not just an option, right? It's a strategic imperative. Recent disruptions have forced logistics companies to rethink their strategies and adopt innovative approaches to stay competitive. But exactly what are those companies doing behind the scenes? What are their top priorities and biggest challenges? And how are they tackling them? And what can we learn from them? Well, to delve deeper into these questions, CargoWise partnered with Reuters Events to survey over 450 logistics supply chain professionals worldwide. They wanted to uncover how organizations are approaching digital transformation and identify key success factors that we can apply to our own businesses. Now, we're going to be sharing the link to that report in the comments, so stay tuned and check that out. Make sure you click that link. And so today, we're going to be exploring the top supply chain disruptions, uncovering leaders' technology investment priorities, and sharing how to build an effective technology framework. Everything you need for success. So if you have any questions throughout the discussion, go ahead and comment in the chat section or in the comments, and we will answer as many as we can. But before we get started, I want to welcome Jared, Jamie, and Dennis to the show. Let's get started with some introductions. Jared, can you introduce yourself and give us a reminder of what you do over at CargoWise?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thank you very much for having me, Sarah. It is my first time on the podcast, so super excited to be a part of it. Yeah, exactly. So to introduce myself, my name's Jared. I work for WiseTech Global. I'm based out of the UK and I'm part of the business development team. So I look after primarily new business accounts across Europe. As a little reminder, WiseTech Global is a software provider to the international and domestic logistics industries. Our flagship product is called CargoWise, and that's in use by many of the multinationals across the globe, but also SMEs who operate in single countries make use of the software. And yeah, the report's been out. I've read it. Looking forward to discussing it. So great to be here.
Yeah, so many great insights. All right, Jamie, can you introduce yourself and talk to us about your role over at Seco?
Hi, thanks for having me as well, Sarah. Also, first time. I'm the VP of Product Management at Seco. So I've been here just shy of 6 years, but I'm responsible for product management across our entire technology stack. So domestic, international, cross-border, 3PL, you name it, kind of rolls under my team. Also responsible for our technology solutions team here at Seco. Started my career in international operations before kind of falling face first into the technology side. So a good mix on both sides of the business.
Awesome. Awesome. So happy you're here. Now, Dennis, last but absolutely not least, introduce yourself. Talk to us about your company, Logineer.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for having me. First podcast as well. So yeah, you're having a bunch of first timers in here. Yeah, who am I? Dennis, based out of Hamburg, Germany, in the logistics industry since 2010. Became a WISE service partner after being operational as a forwarder in 2015. So basically consulting on transport management systems for 10 years now around the globe. And mainly it was CargoWise that we actually used to replace other systems. The interesting part for us is being Logineer and working for a company called Logineer is we're a group of 160 people thriving to digitize the logistics industry. We firmly believe that to future-proof logistics companies, a good structured organizational approach is required, and we're dedicated to deliver that to our customer base.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a big job, right? Digital transformation. I was reading something just the other day. It said that digital transformations are only 20% technology. 80% is everything else. So for everybody that's tuning in, I want to hear where you're tuning in from. So make sure you put in the comments. We want to hear from you. And so let's dive in. I touched on it in the introduction, but can you tell us about the research you conducted and dive a little bit deeper into that for us? Like, why did you commission the report? Who did you speak to? What were you aiming to achieve with this report, Jared?
Yeah, sure. So I suppose maybe to start with the why is at WiseTech we have this mantra, which is find the root cause and solve for that. And really what that's about is that we're not really interested in these, little surface level issues that occur. We really want to go a lot deeper than that and solve for the root cause. So instead of injections for the symptoms, we want to uncover really what's causing all those issues and focus our attention over there. Now, in logistics, we operate in an exceptionally fragmented industry. There are so many different players in the industry. There are so many different moving parts. And to ensure that the information behind that physical supply chain moves seamlessly, that's a big challenge. And that's one of the challenges that WiseTech is looking to resolve with CargoWise. And so we believe that collaborative digital transformation is key to that success and to that future. And what we're looking to do with this report is to empower supply chain professionals by offering, critical insights and actionable strategies that they can take back to their businesses and really digest and try and implement. What did we do with the report itself? So it was survey-based, where we surveyed over 450 people across the globe. The respondents were logistics service providers, manufacturers, retailers, other technology providers, various other stakeholders. Most of the respondents were very senior leaders or management within their respective companies, so directors and C-level executives. And as I mentioned, from the Americas to Europe, Asia, South Pacific, really a good cross-sectional view of the industry. And yeah, let's see what some of the questions that come out of that.
Yeah, well, and I'm glad to see that you did it globally, but also I think for supply chain professionals, supply chain leaders, they also want to know that they're not alone, right? We're kind of all in this together. And so what is it that we're doing right? What is it that we're doing wrong? And let's get it out there so we can all learn from it. So let's talk about what you found out. It feels like since the pandemic, we've not stopped talking about disruption or even digital transformation. I mean, let's be honest, right? So what are some of the top supply chain disruptions that the industry is thinking about according to your report, Jared?
Yeah, so number one on the list is logistics executives are most concerned about geographical tensions, with 1 in 3 citing that. And the problem you have there is it's not just one. We're dealing with so many at the exact same time. So all of these things are becoming compounded. And it becomes really difficult because we're talking about, vessels having to be forcefully rerouted on different transportation routes. You're talking about countries being sanctioned. You're talking about new tariff changes. And so, logistic professionals have to be constantly aware of what's going on and constantly looking out for, better strategies to help serve their end customers. Other significant concerns were cybersecurity, of course, and natural disasters and transportation disruptions. Interestingly, if when we looked at sort of professionals who have North America in their remit, they tended to score cybersecurity significantly higher at I think around 28%. Versus the global average of 19%. And actually, we're slightly less concerned with transportation disruptions and natural disasters. Not sure exactly why the difference over there, but it was interesting to note that there's definitely a big focus on cybersecurity. Just the other week, we saw another 3PL get hit in Jazz. Fortunately, they recovered pretty quickly, and we hope there's no serious concerns after that. But it's front of mind for many.
Yeah, well, and I would also add regulations to that list. It might not be on your graph, but I feel like they're very concerned with regulations as well. So, Jamie, it's interesting to hear how priorities are shifting. I don't think geographical tensions was as high on the list, say, 5 years ago, but with the situations in Ukraine and Gaza now, it's something that's shot to the top of the list. How have you seen disruptions change, and what impact does that have on organizations that are trying to manage multiple threats and priorities?
So I think the biggest thing that we can all agree on is this disruption, or this trend of disruption, is just becoming more and more unpredictable. And
Right.
at the same time, our supply chains are becoming more complex. So you just have all these areas of risk and exposure. So I know we'll touch a little more on like the geographical tensions later, but health crisis, natural disaster, cyber threats, all of that. And then kind of more timely things, you think about just IT outages and downtime, like that CrowdStrike thing from a couple of weeks ago,
Yes.
seriously impacted the air industry, right? We had some of our commercial team is, we've got to fly those planes. Well, I can't physically do anything for you, right? It's a global issue.
Right.
Or even things that people aren't thinking about, like financial health of your partners, right? So look at Yellow Freight last year that just shuttered their doors, huge impact to the US trucking market. And just a couple of weeks ago, Pitney Bowes closing their US cross-border ecom. Like, if those are vendors that your supply chain is heavily dependent on, like, you have to be on the pulse of so many things, like
Yeah.
constantly making sure that you're up to speed on, like, across the board. It's a ton of issues. So I think what a lot of people don't realize is just the size and scope of the supply chain, and how many different companies and businesses and people and industries are involved. And you have one disruption that's small in scope, but it just ripples across industries.
Yeah.
It's really impressive to think about.
Yeah, it's so true. And you don't and it touches people in different ways, and people realize it at different moments, right? And there's so many things to think about, and you have to be agile and be able to pivot as a leader, but you also need your teams to be cognizant of what's going on and helping you to figure out and keep the pulse on what is happening so that you can best pivot as an organization. So that brings me to this question, are businesses prepared, right? Like, what percentage actually have measures in place to navigate this turbulence? I mean, you mentioned cybersecurity earlier. I mean, if there's a cybersecurity threat, you need to also have people who can do things manually, right? If you go down. So those are the types of things that we also need to be thinking about. So Jared, I'm going to start with you, and then we'll go to Dennis.
Yeah. So, if we look at the responses, most respondents, are over 80%, have got some measures in place to navigate these threats. And I think it was, well over half kind of said that we're confident to very confident that their measures were, good enough to kind of respond to these things. And it's difficult to know, right? You can be as prepared as you want to. You can, run scenario testing, and you can kind of have all these real-time monitoring things. We can see the second one there scored very highly, but it's challenging because you just don't know what the world's going to throw at us next. So I think the key is to be, to kind of use Nicholas Taleb's phrase, anti-fragile as possible, so that when a disaster does occur, and it is going to occur, you're less likely to be as affected, and you can pivot.
Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I've been doing a lot of interviews this week, and it's really about, we can't really forecast. We don't know what's going to happen. Nobody predicted the pandemic, right? What do you think about this, Dennis?
Well, to me, it's basically about resilience and focusing on the right topics. So while we've invested a lot of effort and money into new technology over the past years in the forwarding companies and around the supply chain, we need to keep up with our processes, being more straightforward, being more resilient, creating visibility at the right time for the right people to make either a decision on a strategical, operational, or tactical level, if I might use those terms. So the dominance in, or let's say mastering the information space through digitization is going to be the turnkey for the future. Going back to cybersecurity, looking at the fact that cybersecurity or cybercrime is probably the third greatest economy in the world, if it would be a country, with
Oh, wow.
over 8 trillion actually US dollars in damage being caused throughout the industry, and a ton of money being spent on technical measures to counter what we would class as the black hoodie, super smart hacker that is going to attack us. That's not really reality. We're almost forgetting about the human factor. So the most likely hack that's going to happen is a social hack.
Okay.
Somebody grabbing a password or something like that. So one of the things that we should focus on to create more resilience, besides choosing the right technology, is teaching people in terms of cybersecurity awareness and how to use their tech tools that we have provided them in a safe and proper way to prevent damage, especially around cybersecurity. So I think that's a crucial part to that. From a technology point of view, do something, but you're going to be most likely attacked through the human factor.
Yeah, yeah. I've done a lot of research on that. I've had some experts in cybersecurity on the show, and they'd say the same thing. You have to be able to train and make sure that everybody's on the same page, and even, test them every once in a while to see what happens. Now, 8 trillion is a really impressive figure. Exactly what types of measures do people have in place? How do these measures address the most pressing challenges that we've kind of talked about already? I'm going to start with Jared and then I'm going to go to Jamie.
Yeah. So if we look at the strategies that supply chain professionals are trying to implement to avoid these disasters, is at the top of the list was actively reviewing and diversifying their supplier base. So instead of only relying in one supplier in China, I'm going to have a second one in India. I might have a third one in Bangladesh, so that an impact to one particular country or one particular supplier is not so severe to me moving the goods. They also look at establishing alternate transportation routes. So if we had to look at the Red Sea example, instead of going through the Suez Canal, we can go across Africa. We can kind of maybe use a multimodal approach where we're not just going on ocean, but maybe a bit of air freight, a bit of rail freight, and trying to optimize that. They're also looking at multiple logistics partners. So instead of having, one particular agent in a big country, they might look for 2 or 3 so that, a drop in service level or an issue with that particular agent can be overcome because I've got relationships with other people in the area. And then I think it was around 20%, so 1 in 5 of those that we surveyed have inventory buffers as the strategy. So it's like, okay, well, if something happens, it's okay because I've got extra in stock, right? Which I suppose is a strategy as well. But I suppose interestingly as well is that 15% of people were still developing measures, meaning, okay, we don't quite have a strategy yet to implement for our particular supply chain, which is quite a high number, considering things. So
Absolutely. And, when you talk about diversifying the supplier base and a few other things, I mean, you're going to need technology to manage all of that because one person isn't going to be able to do that. Plus, you're going to need a lot of capital to be able to cover that just in case inventory as well. So a few things just to note on that. Jamie, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, when I was thinking about this question too, right, diversifying and building alternate routes are important. There's also that may cost more, right? You may be using a certain vendor or transport provider or going via a certain trade lane because the transit time is lower. But even putting some of your freight with it on an alternative route, whether that's 10 or 15%, like the cost of investing in that alternate route versus not having a plan of action. I think about it like if you're at the airport and your flight gets canceled and you're on the cheapest airline and you don't have status, then you're just in a queue of people trying to hopefully not spend the night at the airport, right? You have to build some resiliency into your plan. I think the biggest thing that I'd want people to walk away from this from, if you're not planning or if you haven't done a risk assessment and looked at your supply chain and just started to see where there's areas to diversify or add in another vendor or move some of your cargo to the East Coast if it's purely going out of the West, like you've got to start thinking about that stuff. It's why we all have car insurance and homeowners insurance, right? Something will happen. That's a fact. It's just a matter of when and how prepared are you to pivot at that point.
Well, and that happened to me this week with the pilot strike with Air Canada. I think I was on the phone for 4 hours over 2 days trying to figure myself out so that I don't get caught up in it. But one of the things that I wanted to jump on at what you said was investment, right? Your contingency plans shouldn't be looked at as a cost center. It should be looked at as an investment, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because if something happens, you get stuck, or to the point about holding some safety stock, right? If that is a component for your manufacturing that's going to pull your line down, what is the cost per hour impact of that versus the initial capital investment of getting those parts and holding them for that just in case moment? So you got to weigh that.
Absolutely. So all of that sounds, promising. It sounds like we've got some work to do. I think there's still plenty of areas for improvement, right? So Dennis, where have you found that organizations are lacking? Where are the biggest opportunities maybe for companies to enhance their response capabilities?
So first of all, as usual, give the right people the right tools at the right time. The right tools in that respect is creating internal and external visibility. Provide data to all the participants in the supply chain, provide data internally to your employees, use the tools that you have right there and utilize that within your processes. The next thing that is usually up for improvement is actually have globally standardized processes where you can and
Right.
have a system that's supporting them in a way that you literally could transfer a certain type of business easily into another branch that is maybe not affected by a hurricane, a storm, a power outage, or whatever. So you have people that could do the job remotely because the system or a system will guide them through that process. They are going to have easy access to information. Again, information is key there, and that's where a lot of organizations are struggling in terms of transferring the knowledge that their operators do have in their heads as valuable employees into something that I can utilize if things go haywire. That's a true struggle that we didn't overcome even within even with the pandemic forcing us almost into getting into a more remote or hybrid working scenario, right? I mean, we're still subject to hurricanes. If you're, for example, looking at Miami, having a power outage literally every other week in an area around the airport. So how do you deal with that if that long takes a day? That is actually stuff that we see a lot. So one of the biggest opportunities is get a structured approach to the topic.
And
Get
apply.
into and apply it. Be aware of who needs strategical information at what time, who needs operational information, which is usually your branch leaders, your country managers, and so on and so forth. And on a tactical level, I have people at desk level, at the team managers, at the department leads that do have a tool in place where they can see and at least use the little time that we have to forecast or at least anticipate that there is a surge of let's say, work, disaster, or however you want to call it, rolling towards them, and then have means for them to react to that, even if not all people are in the same room.
Yeah, well, and I think about when you talk about that, I think about the cybersecurity plan, right? What's the escalation plan? Who do you need to go to? Who needs to know? When do you need to do it by? These are all the plans that you need in place to be able to do that. And that is a huge area of opportunity because most people don't put it in place until it actually happens. But no, you really need to make sure that you've got these escalation plans in place. Your people know who to go to for what when something happens. Now, I want to give a shout out to a whole bunch of people on my personal LinkedIn page: Chris White, Paula Norton, Christina. We've got Mohammed, Toby, Niles. We've got Raj. We've also got VLAN and Yaber. Thank you so much for joining us over on my personal LinkedIn. And keep those comments and questions coming because we are going to get to those near the end of the show. So scenario planning is key, but in order for companies to do that effectively, they need good, up-to-date, clean data and the technology to analyze it, right? And that's really where we get into murky waters. Digital transformation is vital for the industry, but a lot of organizations are struggling with it. I came across a stat the other day that said 80% of digital transformations actually fail. So especially because we're now in a situation where we have this multi-platform tech stack approach. So Jamie, what are the biggest challenges associated with this approach? What's the impact on data and cybersecurity, for example?
So I'll pull a little bit on Dennis's comments around, needing to focus on the data, especially as a starting point. So if you're operating on 3, 4, 5 different applications within your business, right? You have 3, 4, or 5 sets of data that all represent different things, and they may be the same thing, but they are not talking to each other. So, if you don't invest in a data program to get to the point where you have a single uniform, like normalized set of master data that you can look at a global level across. And that's not easy. You have to go and figure out what is it that I'm trying to get in terms of reporting. How do each of those systems feed that? What equals A in each system and what equals B? Otherwise, you have a team of people that kind of represent each of those systems, manually pulling data and trying to, cross-reference things to get to a point where you have the data you need to make these decisions. So really going down to ground level and understanding what you want to track or trend across your business, and then how to get each of the data across those systems, and investing in a BI and some sort of normalization or transformation tool for that data. You can't make decisions without looking at it from that level. And then on the security aspect of it, in my experience, if you have 3, 4, or 5 systems, some of them are probably a little outdated or came over as part of an acquisition, and it's just multiple entry points. We talked about the user, most of the security breaches you're going to see is because the user clicked a thing they shouldn't have clicked, right? When you're trying to manage that across that many applications, it becomes more difficult to do.
Absolutely. Well, and when you think about different technologies, I think about multiple logins, which is very scary, but then also keeping the data up to date when you're uploading and downloading and you're on version, 28 or 52. You know what I mean? Like that is just a recipe for disaster.
Absolutely.
So, Dennis, as organizations look to the future, thinking about mitigating these rising cyber risks, tackling disruption, what are logistics leaders sort of thinking about? What are the key investment priorities when it comes to technology? What are they looking more into right now?
I mean, I'm pretty much going out of business because Jamie has taken up my role. So, if you're looking at multiple systems that you need to operate your business, you have multiple angles of attack. Looking at the industry moving into more and more cloud environments, not all of those software suppliers that you're going to work with are in the same cloud. So you might have bits and pieces in cloud A, bits and pieces in cloud B. So you're even sharing crucial core information that's critical for your business over the internet. Yes, you can secure that, but it's definitely a point that's vulnerable to attack. I mean, Sarah, yourself, you mentioned login data, which brings us back to social engineering. I mean, who are you? Where are you coming from? What are your siblings? Let's try those to get actually access to a cloud and then drive into the system. So one of the interests is, of course, mitigating those risks, get more resilient.
Yeah.
While there is a focus on going for more secure technology, multi-factor authentication and so on and so forth is almost an outdated discussion, I would say.
Mhm.
But again, re-emphasize that with your staff, get into a decentralized approach in terms of storing backups and so on and so forth, and having good and secure network capabilities around the globe. In all fairness, Jamie, you mentioned CrowdStrike. The one thing that we can't mitigate at some point is we will have always crucial components that will cause failure in the system
Mm.
at some point. And there's really no smart way how you could have mitigated for something like CrowdStrike coming our way. But having a multitude of systems that you are core requirement to function to operate your business, that's definitely a risk that you can mitigate with a system that you can make as resilient and hard as possible, that has the core of your data, and as long as this system functions or is available as a backup, you're good to operate.
Well, and it's interesting, right? Because we talk about the industry working in silos, and you just said to decentralize so that we've got backup upon backup upon backup, so that if something like CrowdStrike happens and things like that. So, it's kind of, we want to go towards collaboration. We want to make sure we have seamless technologies, but at the same time, we also need to protect. So it's very hard to navigate.
Well, it's if we're talking about decentralization, we're talking about decentralizing geophysical locations, right?
Mhm.
Best example, I have two of my data centers next to a major airport, and unfortunately, somebody crashes a plane into both of them, and or
Right.
the area is affected by heavy flooding or a power outage.
Mhm.
Then I do have a beautiful backup, but it's not available to me.
Mhm.
So the question is not to decentralize data, but decentralize the physical location where the
Mm.
data is actually stored with a good
That's a good
backup.
point. Because also, sorry to interrupt, but also I
You're
was
good.
thinking about client data, because it's not just our own organizational data. We all have client data as well. And if we're not protecting that, we're opening ourselves up to a whole different world around legal threats and things like that too.
Looking especially at Europe, where NIS2 is going to become a thing that more and more authorities are going to enforce on participants on the supply chain. For example, the aviation security authorities in Germany have just lately put out a statement where the NIS2 regulations are becoming crucial for air freight security in at least Germany, and that usually means at some point definitely in Europe.
Mm. So
So
many
this
things.
is going to be a part of our world.
Yeah, and so many things to think about. So, Jamie, what are the outcomes that you think that organizations are hoping to achieve with these technology investments, and thinking about technology and data a little bit differently, and where it's stored and how we've got backups and different things like that?
So I think the two things that everybody is after is better, faster data, and
Mm.
then how can they build, efficiency and resiliency into their actual operation with some of the technological tools that are available, right? So from the data side, and you referenced this a little bit, but part of what we do, at least where I sit as a freight forwarder through PL, yes, our data is important to help our customers manage their supply chain, but they're also taking the data that we're giving them to manage their own, right? So they're buying services from us, but they're also buying the data that they need to drive the decision making from their business.
Hmm.
So when we look at, if you're going to, as a retailer or distributor, you're going to diversify because you want to build some resiliency into your supply chain, they need to be investing in some sort of, now they have data coming from multiple transport providers. How do
Right.
they aggregate that together to get visibility across their supply chain. So that's, I think, ultimately investing in the data component and some sort of BI layer to manage it, to give you those insights is super important. And then internally, everybody's trying to increase operational efficiency. So in that scenario, I would say you really, again, start at the bottom with your processes. I think Dennis mentioned earlier the importance of getting down to like a singular global operational process. Typically, you get a vendor that calls you and says, I can help you automate this, or I can remove this, thing, this manual thing out of your operation. And if you let that kind of drive the decision of where you invest in your technology, you probably aren't going to get the results that you're hoping for. You have to start internally, understand what your operators are doing, find an area of opportunity, and let that lead the investment strategy.
Absolutely. Now, Bayram, I want to give you a shout out because I see your questions, and we are going to get to questions in just a little bit. If anybody has any questions for the panelists, now is the time to put it in the comments, because we're going to get to those very, very soon. Now, of course, to achieve these desired results that organizations need to build an effective technology framework. Let's talk a little bit about that, because, there's a lot of moving parts like we've talked about already. So what mix of solutions are logistics companies currently utilizing in their tech stacks? And is that approach working? So I'll go with Dennis, and then Jamie, and then Jared. We're going to bring you back into the conversation after this.
So, I mean, we do have a tendency to global one file systems. I mean, prime example is sponsoring this show, being CargoWise. There is a couple of others out there that do work in that, let's say, manner, or in a similar manner as well. Moving that into standardized processes, which Jamie already mentioned, is definitely one of the cores. Another one is going from, especially on Office IT, going from self-hosted service alongside with Microsoft and all the other bigger providers here on planet Earth, into cloud-based solutions that are a little bit easier to be protectable than by your own cybersecurity team that you might host. I mean, those organizations have a slight level of expertise actually in that is bigger. So that's working a lot, and providing good visibility to all participants actually in the supply chain. It's going to a more collaborative tech stack. So whatever tool allows collaboration in one way or the other is actually currently key and driven by the industry. Mainly have customers entering their own data to make sure it's right, and then rather checking the data than retyping it. Having integrations with your customers or your partners within the supply chain, having a good source of tracking data provided by carriers, all of that is flying into being the crucial tech stack for success. And it drills down to having information available as fast as possible, going back to resilience and reaction to disruptions. It's all about having those, and literally that's what everybody is striving for, one way or the other. If we're talking about challenges, we're down to structure again.
Right.
It's like, how do I do it right? What are the partners to connect to? What are the global platforms driving it? And what will be at some point a global standard that everybody in the forwarding industry can agree to? I mean, looking at, for example, the air freight industry, we're talking standards based on developments from the 1980s at best. Right. So
wow,
we should slightly improve that.
We should take a look at those, right, Dennis?
Yeah, yeah.
But you're speaking my language because you used the word collaboration. I was hoping that word collaboration was going to come in here somewhere. Jamie, what do you think about what Dennis just said? Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I'll touch on is around the ability to integrate and to do so easily, right? I'll give you an example. So Seco's multi-system. We have different warehouse systems, different international systems, domestic application. But guess what? Everyone's using FedEx. So prior life, right? Every single system maintained their own integration with FedEx. So if FedEx changed their API, we now have to go 3 different development teams and update that API 3 times, right? So centralizing that, which we've done now, but into like an overall carrier services hub where everybody hits that same before it goes out. Just making your organization a little more nimble to be able to react to things like that and less maintenance overall of those integrations. And I think it's not something that just we're thinking about, but if you look at, go back in time to when new customer visibility tools were coming out and people were coming to me and, oh, it just plugs right into CargoWise, but that was the only system that it plugged into. And now you're seeing more of these solutions come on the market that are really system agnostic. So giving, those retailers or vendors the ability to plug in if they're multi-system into a singular tool that'll give them that visibility. So I think it's just getting to more of like a white label, very easy to integrate is really where I'm seeing things trend towards.
Amazing. So, Jared, let's bring you into that conversation and talk about centralizing technology platforms. What results or other results than what Jamie just said could organizations achieve by doing this? And I think you've got some stats from the report.
Yeah. So most logistics organizations, so like over 50%, use a mix of global and local solutions. But equally, the vast majority, so around 64%, all agree that it does hinder productivity. So there's this desire, this drive to try and unify that, try and remove systems wherever possible. And the survey shows a clear preference for that sort of unification and that desire to streamline operations. And again, sort of coming back to the conversation we just had with Jamie and Dennis, the only point I would add is that every time you add a piece of software, there's another vendor you got to manage. There's another set of master data that comes with that. There's an integration. There's a cybersecurity tag. But really, all of that is hidden cost, because at the end of the day, what you get on a piece of paper is what that piece of software costs you. And so you go, oh, it costs X. But yeah, it might cost X, which you have to pay. But what about all this other cost that's clearly there, but you're not quantifying? And often that kind of it makes for a very muddy picture because it's hard to kind of really equate that. And so part of our work with our customers is trying to, broaden that conversation and say, yeah, I know it costs you that, but, have you thought about all these other things which are actually causing a lot of, pressure in your business?
Absolutely.
But, if we kind of, go with this approach of unifying systems, what benefits are customers seeing? Well, you're going to centralize your technology platforms, which means you're going to reduce your operational redundancies. You're going to minimize integration challenges. So great example by Jamie there. You still have to have the integrations because you've got different systems. But hey, if it's the same integration, maybe you can save on some resources there. Excellent way to optimize that and just enhance overall system interoperability so that you're jumping as few times as possible between everything. And sort of that approach facilitates, smoother data flows, better visibility to all parties involved, and can maybe strengthen the decision-making capabilities because you trust it more, and therefore you can respond better when things happen.
And that response is key, especially when it comes to logistics. Now, Dennis, I want to ask you, you've been working with CargoWise, excuse me, for a while. How do they help clients streamline operations through integration and standardization?
Well, first of all, going by standardization, right? If I can use the same process, the same core process for every other of my businesses, I'm faster in implementing new business, new trade lanes, taking up new users, training up new users, if I have to react to a disruption. I mean, we've looked at disruptions in terms of being a negative event, but what happens if I take up the next big A-level client?
Right.
New set of data, bigger volumes. I have to react to that. And I have to train users very quickly to be able to actually contribute, because as we've established for various reasons, our world has become tremendously faster and requires a different remote response time, right? We're not down to typewriters and fax anymore. We're in environments where integration is expected, and almost real-time data required for every other business. Why is real-time data required? Because we have to respond to all of those wonderful disasters that are going on planet Earth. Besides our own little disasters in front of our own doors, right? I mean, that's just like that's where organizations have to leverage whatever they can standardize and automate, and take whatever support for the user a system can provide, specifically in terms of visibility, providing the right information at the right time for the right people. I can only elaborate that a multitude of times. And taking away unnecessary work from your operators. To help them to focus on the right stuff. I mean, if we want to bring up a cybersecurity example, right? What do you do if you're overwhelmed, stressed, and extremely busy with dealing with the next surge of work, and there is a pop-up in your email? Do you want to activate macros for
No.
this attachment,
Don't
right?
do it.
And we're actually drilled upon clicking on OK, because the entire IT world has educated us in a manner where you have been really drilled to click on OK, because OK solves all the problems.
Dennis, I think you have just made everybody's stomach drop in the whole audience that are watching us today, because I'm sure every one of us has done it once.
But that's our reality, right? Because people are dealing with a multitude of systems, multitude of information sources, and to help them focus on the core and doing things right. I mean, for God's sake, let's provide them with a good platform, a good, solid, resilient platform
that they can
that
trust.
actually they can trust, and that enables them to focus on rather quality than quantity. Right? We want to improve the customer experience. We want to do more of the same good jobs. So have a piece of kit that actually helps them, right? If you're giving a professional handyman or craftsman a set of cheap tools, you will see that in his productivity. It's nothing different in IT.
Yeah, and
Give them a good.
It's a good analogy. It's a really good analogy. Now, I want to make sure that we've got time to go to the audience questions, so I don't mean to interrupt, but I think, Jamie, you have a bit of a case study you want to share with us before we go to those audience questions.
Yeah, I mean, I laughed when we saw the question about the case study, because we're a CargoWise customer, obviously. That's why I'm here. I think the biggest thing for us, I'll try and be brief, but when I joined 6 years ago, we had kind of built this model where every station and every client had their own custom workflow, which CargoWise is great and can definitely support. But from an operational and functional perspective, to Dennis's point about, the global process, like, you can't function like that. You can't scale. You can't have an operator doing things differently desk to desk or even client to client if you want to get any sort of efficiency. So we really started, ground zero, like literally went to stations, sat with operators, understand what a day in their life looks like, job file from A to Z, and where are they doing things outside of the system and why. So everyone's favorite tool of Excel, what are we managing there? Can we put it in CargoWise? Can we automate? And before we even talked about bringing in any external tools to support the operation, we you got to look internally first. So we really started to push everything that we could back into Carrier, to CargoWise, turned on some of their out of the box stuff like the e-bookings, auto rating, like use what you've got and make yourselves more efficient. And then to my point earlier, then when you look at, okay, we still have these points in the process that are kind of bottlenecks or slowdowns, which one is the most impactful and what can we solve to go and do that? So that's kind of the journey that we were on. And now we're at the point where we're pretty stable, pretty smooth, and trying to see like, okay, our house is built now, like, should we upgrade our kitchen, get new countertops? Like what's next for us in the innovation space there? So
it's the taps for me. I mean, which ones are you going to choose and which one's going to go with what? I mean,
we're in the fun part now. We did all the hard work. We had good tools, thankfully, not some old. So.
I love the way you thought about that. And so I want to get to some audience questions, and then we've got a couple more questions to ask all of you. So one question that we have from Bayram, going back to us talking about the data, how can we select the data that matters? Now, I've talked about this on the show quite a few times, good data, bad data. How do we know what we need? We get so much data coming at us. How do we filter that? How do we know what we need? I don't know if Jared, you want to answer this or...
I think it'd be great to actually get Dennis and Jamie's opinion
All
on this.
right,
I mean,
Dennis.
for me, I mean, like, I kind of, me and Dennis tag team a lot in when it comes to sort of customer engagements. And I've got to tee him up because, he does the hard work. He's over there, he's with the customer, he's on the ground, he's got all the challenges to deal with, and he kind of does this for a living. So Dennis, there, I've teed you up.
Okay, go. Thank you. No pressure, right? So, I mean, simple. In a nutshell, freight forwarding and supply chain management is having the right goods at the right time at the right place. So pretty much it's moving stuff from A to B. And we're all always talking about cargo tracking, which is the first event-based thing, but that's usually stuff that's working in the past. So what is important in terms of data is telling us where a certain thing, cargo, or a status of a process is at a specific time and point. So we're talking about events. What is an event? An event is pretty much a thing that we have that's happening caused by an actor, that actor being human or tech. So it could be computer, an integration, or just a user keying in data. Those happen all the time. What is of relevance is everything that tells us something about state or a status of freight or an internal process that's crucial for us to track. So in terms of what you should do is, what is crucial information that a participant in the supply chain needs, and what is its digital trace? Find that digital trace, make it visible. There is no rule of thumb for that, but there is for sure common ground across most of your operational processes and most of the cargo movements. And then you add in local or customer specific, I would say, complementary or adding information that goes from general to more specialized, local, customer specific transport direction, if we want to take it that way, and find a system that actually supports you in having that visibility, and then do a big data job. That's not too hard. It's just meaningful data for your business case as a rule of thumb.
Great. Thank you for that. Now I've got a question. I think I'm going to send this one to Jamie from Niles. How can logistics companies overcome the perceived lack of resources and resistance to change when implementing such digital transformation initiatives?
I'm laughing a little bit because it might not be a perceived lack of resources.
Yeah, that's the nice version.
I mean, I'm assuming we're talking lack of resources on the IT side. I mean, so for us, we have, a handful of different systems. Obviously, each of those systems has product stakeholders that have an agenda and want to achieve things either out of their operations teams or from a data visibility perspective. And like we can't do it all at the same time, right? So it's a little bit of, stakeholder management, what goes first, second, third, and it's also, you can bring in outside people to support. So we have, our internal team that'll do the solutioning, and then we may hand the build of that BI out to a contractor because we might pay a little bit of a money up front, but we can get the tool that we need or the solution solved in a quick manner, right? Versus it goes into our backlog queue, right? You kind of just have to play around and invest where it makes sense in bringing in outside people. If you do the legwork, like if we go back to the data piece and we know here's the output that we want, here's what we need to get from each of those systems, but I don't have a resource to put on actually doing the build. If you put the effort into making the plan at least, or the technical piece of it, somebody can just pick it up and build it. I mean, if anybody has solved the lack of resources in digital transformation, please hit me up on LinkedIn because I'd love to talk to you.
Bringing the community together. You're going to have so many messages in your DMs. Just saying. All right. Well, before we go, I want to ask each one of you, what is one thing that you want people to walk away from this discussion doing or maybe thinking about? Jared, I'll start with you, then we'll go to Jamie and Dennis.
So we've discussed a lot today about how logistics is transforming, driven by the need by all these disruptions that we're facing as a collective. And that's not going to slow down. It's not going to stop. And so a collaborative effort in digital transformation is absolutely crucial to the future of logistics. So we want all people to get involved. We need people to share ideas and be open to the idea of creating something that's vastly different and better than what we've created so far. And technology is a part of that. So, embrace technology investment. Think about, building robust technology frameworks that are more global in nature and less disparate. And, that's going to shape the future of our industry. It's going to drive operational excellence. It's going to make people less stressed at work so they can leave on time and increase customer experience. The three things that have been so key over the last handful of years.
Who doesn't want less stress in logistics and supply chain? All right, Jamie, what's one thing you'd like everybody to walk away from thinking about or taking action on today?
I think the biggest thing is just if you're looking at starting to build some sort of resiliency or alternative plan to your supply chain, like really get to the people and process section first. What are your objectives? What are the outcomes that you're after? What's your end goal? Like really understand your business and what you want to get out of that initiative. And then you can work on the technology piece. I think so many people start the other way around. So people, process, then systems. That's my.
You can't start with
signing off.
You can't start with a tap without a countertop or a sink. I'm not sure. I'm trying to figure out that analogy. All right, Dennis, you have the last word. What is one thing you'd like everybody to walk away from this with?
Well, couldn't agree more with Jamie in terms of people, process, systems. So tech is a tech is a tool. You shouldn't fight it back. One thing that's maybe important for the industry is information space, and digitization is crucially important for the industry. But forwarders focus on forwarding, and if they need help with a tech stack or good technology, don't try to reinvent the wheel. There's people out there that can actually do that very well. Embrace that. Let's do a good collaborative approach. That's where I agree to make the industry better. Because if we fail in moving goods, the world is going down.
I think you just overwhelmed everybody in the audience, but thank you for that, Dennis. I mean, you're right, though. Logistics and supply chain are vital to the global economy and, all of us as human beings. So I completely agree with you. Well, that brings us to the end of today's LinkedIn Live. Thank you so much for joining me, Jared, Jamie, and Dennis. It's been fascinating to hear what organizations are doing, what they're thinking about, and how they're tackling the disruptions that are impacting all of us. And once again, it's really highlighted the importance of digital transformation and strategic technology adoption in navigating these supply chain disruptions. So if you want to find out how CargoWise can help you future-proof your supply chain operations by leveraging technology, and if you'd like to download the report we've talked about today, the link is in the comments for the report, and you can check them out over at cargowise.com. A big thank you to all of you for listening, watching, and commenting. I hope the insights we've shared today have inspired all of you to think about your priorities when it comes to disruption and technology as we head into 2025. Thanks again, everyone, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.